In a rundown diner parking lot in small-town Colorado, a struggling single father with only $20 to his name encounters a desperate mother clutching her hungry baby. Without hesitation, he hands over his last bill, knowing it means another night without groceries for himself. What happens next will leave you speechless. This isn't just a story about $20 or empty stomachs. It's about how one moment of generosity can unlock doors you never knew existed, and how the universe sometimes rewards the purest hearts in the most unexpected ways. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. This is more than just a story about a $20 bill changing hands in a diner parking lot. This is a story about the invisible threads that connect us all, about how the universe keeps perfect accounts, and about why the smallest gestures often carry the greatest power. What you're about to witness will challenge everything you think you know about coincidence, destiny, and the true meaning of wealth. We invite you into a world where kindness isn't just rewarded, it's multiplied beyond imagination. Where a single father's desperate act of compassion sets off a chain reaction that transforms not just his life, but an entire community. This is a journey that proves miracles don't always announce themselves with thunder and lightning. Sometimes they whisper through the rustle of a $20 bill passed from one struggling soul to another. In the next 40 minutes, you'll discover how one moment of selfless generosity becomes the foundation for something extraordinary. You'll witness how love, when given freely, returns in ways that defy logic and restore faith in humanity's deepest goodness. This isn't just entertainment. It's a reminder that every act of kindness plants seeds in soil we may never see, but harvests we will always eventually reap. If you've ever wondered whether good deeds truly matter, whether the universe notices when we choose compassion over self-preservation, or whether there's still magic left in this often cynical world, then this story is for you. We're not just telling you about transformation, we're inviting you to witness it, to feel it, and to carry it forward into your own life. Before we begin, we want you to know that this community we're building together believes in the power of stories to change hearts. Every person who chooses to subscribe, to share their own experiences of unexpected kindness, to comment with their hometown or their favorite moment from these stories, you're all part of something bigger. You're part of a movement that refuses to let cynicism win, that insists on finding light in dark places, that celebrates the extraordinary hiding in the ordinary. The story you're about to hear happened in Millfield, Colorado, a town so small that if you blinked while driving through, you'd miss it entirely. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, where the main street has more empty storefronts than occupied ones, and where dreams often feel as distant as the mountain peaks that ring the valley. But it's also the kind of place where miracles can still happen, where people still care about their neighbors, and where $20 can change the course of multiple lives. Our story centers around a man named Liam Smith, a single father whose world had been quietly falling apart for months. But before we meet Liam in all his struggling humanity, before we walk alongside him through his darkest hour and witness his choice to give when he had nothing left to give, we want to prepare your heart for what's coming. You're about to see how poverty can't diminish the richness of a generous spirit, how desperation can coexist with dignity, how the act of giving, even when it hurts, even when it seems impossible, can open doorways to futures we never dared imagine. This story will take you from the edge of financial ruin to the heights of unexpected prosperity, but more importantly, it will show you how love, real, sacrificial, unconditional love, remains the most valuable currency in any economy. So settle in, open your heart, and prepare to believe again in the impossible. Because what starts with a $20 bill in a diner parking lot becomes something that will leave you forever changed. This is the story of how one man's last $20 became the first chapter of a $1 million miracle. And remember, as you watch this unfold, that you too carry the power to change someone's world. You too have the ability to plant seeds of kindness that may bloom into miracles. You too are part of this beautiful, interconnected web of humanity where every generous act matters, every compassionate choice counts, and every person has the potential to be someone else's answered prayer. Welcome to a story that will restore your faith in the impossible and remind you why love always finds a way to multiply itself beyond our wildest dreams. But this transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't come without struggle. You'll walk with Liam through moments when hope seems foolish, when practical wisdom would counsel holding on to that last $20, when every rational voice would say, take care of yourself first. You'll feel the weight of his decision in real time, understanding that this isn't just about money. It's about the kind of person he chooses to be when nobody's watching, when there's no guarantee of reward, when kindness costs everything he had left. The woman he encounters, Serenity Fuller, carries her own story of heartbreak and resilience. She's not just a plot device or a recipient of charity. She's a mother fighting for her daughter's survival, a person with dreams that got derailed, a human being worthy of dignity and hope. When their paths cross in that parking lot, it's not just a transaction. It's a moment when two souls recognize something sacred in each other's struggle. What makes this story extraordinary isn't just the financial miracle that follows, though that will absolutely amaze you. It's the revelation that true wealth was present in that parking lot long before any $1 million surprise arrived. It was there in Liam's willingness to give. It was there in Serenity's grateful tears. It was there in the baby's innocent trust that the world would provide. The money that comes later simply confirms what was already true, that love is the most powerful force in the universe. And when we align ourselves with it, impossible things become inevitable. As we journey together through this story, pay attention to the small moments. Notice how a man's character is revealed not through grand gestures, but through what he does when he thinks nobody important is watching. Observe how dignity can shine through desperation, how hope can survive when circumstances suggest it shouldn't, how community forms when people choose connection over isolation. These details matter because they're the building blocks of miracles. This story will challenge you to reconsider what you think you know about success, about worthiness, about the way the universe operates. It will ask you to believe that kindness is never wasted, that love always finds its way back to the giver, and that sometimes the best investment we can make is in another human being's hope. By the end, you'll understand that the real miracle wasn't the money. It was the moment Liam decided that someone else's need mattered more than his own fear. The alarm clock's shrill cry cut through the pre-dawn darkness of Liam Smith's cramped apartment above Mabel's diner, but he was already awake. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford, not when the bills stacked on his kitchen table seemed to multiply overnight like some cruel mathematical curse. The red final notice stamps glared at him through the gloom, each one a reminder that his world was slowly crumbling around him, one unpaid invoice at a time. Liam swung his legs over the side of the narrow bed and immediately felt the familiar ache in his lower back, a souvenir from years of hunching over kitchen prep stations and carrying heavy supply boxes. At 32, he felt decades older, worn down by the relentless grind of trying to keep his head above water in a town where opportunities were as scarce as rainfall in August. His calloused hands, permanently stained with coffee grounds and cooking oil, told the story of a man who had never been afraid of honest work, even when that work barely paid enough to survive. The apartment itself was a testament to making do with less, Two small rooms above the diner that had seen better decades, with wallpaper peeling at the corners and a bathroom door that stuck so badly you had to throw your whole body weight against it. The kitchen consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge that wheezed like an old dog, and a sink that dripped with the persistence of a metronome. But Liam had scrubbed every surface until it gleamed, hung cheerful yellow curtains that his sister had sewn for him years ago, and arranged the sparse furniture to create the illusion of comfort. On the windowsill sat a photo that stopped him. Every morning, his daughter Emma, at age 6, gap-toothed and grinning, wearing the princess costume he'd saved for months to buy her. She'd been gone 3 years now, living with her mother in Denver after the divorce that had split his life into before and after. The custody arrangement allowed him 1 weekend a month, but even that was becoming impossible to afford with the gas money and the small gifts he refused to show up empty-handed without. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Liam's reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man who was fighting to maintain his dignity despite circumstances that seemed designed to strip it away. His brown hair, prematurely touched with grey at the temples, was always neatly combed. His clothes, though second-hand and worn thin in places, were clean and pressed. He'd learned early in life that you could be poor without looking defeated, that how you presented yourself to the world was one of the few things nobody could take away from you. The work uniform waiting for him consisted of a black polo shirt, with Mabel's Diner embroidered over the pocket, a shirt he hand-washed every night to avoid laundromat fees, and the same pair of black pants he'd been rotating for the past year. His work shoes had holes in the soles that he'd covered with duct tape, but he'd learned to step carefully to avoid the embarrassing squeak that betrayed their condition. Downstairs, Mabel's Diner represented everything that was struggling to survive in Millfield, Colorado. The red vinyl booths were patched with electrical tape, the linoleum floor was clean but cracked in a dozen places, and the world's best coffee sign flickered intermittently above the counter. But there was something stubbornly hopeful about the place, with its handwritten daily specials board and the way morning light streamed through windows that Liam cleaned religiously every week. The regulars who filtered in before sunrise were mostly ranch hands, truck drivers, and the occasional early-rising retiree nursing their social security checks until the next month. They were good people, salt-of-the-earth folks who tipped when they could and always had a kind word, but they weren't the kind of customers who could keep a struggling business afloat. Most ordered coffee and toast, maybe eggs if it was payday. The elaborate breakfast platters on the menu were relics from better times. Liam's relationship with Mabel Henderson, the diner's 73-year-old owner, was complicated by mutual financial desperation. She'd owned the place for 40 years, watching it thrive in the 1980s when the copper mine was still operational and the town had a future. Now, she could barely afford to keep the lights on, let alone pay her only full-time employee a living wage. But she couldn't bring herself to fire Liam, knowing he had nowhere else to go, and he couldn't bring himself to quit, knowing she needed him to survive. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on Liam's shoulders as he fired up the ancient coffee machine and began prep work for the morning rush that would bring maybe a dozen customers on a good day. He'd been supplementing his income with odd jobs, snow removal in winter, lawn care in summer, anything that paid cash and didn't interfere with his diner schedule. But even working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, he was barely treading water. The $20 bill in his wallet represented more than emergency money. It was his buffer against complete catastrophe, his insurance policy against the moment when everything finally collapsed. $20 could buy groceries for 3 days if he was careful. It could cover gas to visit Emma if she called and begged him to come see her school play. It could pay for the blood pressure medication he'd been rationing to make it last longer. As the morning wore on and the familiar rhythm of coffee brewing and eggs frying filled the air, Liam found himself staring out the window at the empty main street of Millfield. Half the storefronts were vacant, their for lease signs faded by the harsh Colorado sun. The bank had a foreclosure notice in its window. Even the gas station was struggling, its prices higher than the stations in bigger towns because it couldn't buy fuel in bulk. This was the reality of small-town America that didn't make it into tourism brochures or political speeches. This was where dreams came to die quietly, where good people worked themselves to exhaustion for wages that couldn't sustain basic dignity, where a $20 bill could mean the difference between eating and going hungry. But it was also where character was forged in the crucible of hardship, where community mattered because survival depended on looking out for each other, where small acts of kindness carried the weight of miracles because they cost everything the giver had to offer. The photograph on Liam's windowsill wasn't just a picture. It was a daily reminder of everything he'd lost and everything he was fighting to preserve. Emma Rose Smith, captured at 6 years old, in a moment of pure joy, her missing front teeth creating a gap-toothed grin that had once been the center of his universe. The princess costume she wore was wrinkled from hours of play, the plastic tiara slightly crooked, but to Liam, she looked more regal than any queen who'd ever lived. 3 years had passed since the divorce, but the wound felt as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. The marriage to Rebecca hadn't ended in dramatic explosions or bitter accusations. It had simply withered under the weight of financial stress, unfulfilled dreams, and two people who'd grown into strangers sharing the same small space. When the copper mine closed and Liam lost his job as the equipment operator, the foundation of their life together had crumbled like old concrete. Rebecca had been patient at first, understanding even as Liam scrambled to find work in a town where opportunities were disappearing faster than snow in spring sunshine. But patience had limits, especially when Emma needed new shoes and school supplies, when the electricity company sent final notices, when choosing between groceries and rent became a monthly decision. The breaking point came on Emma's 7th birthday, when Liam couldn't afford the bicycle she'd been dreaming about for months. He'd seen something die in Rebecca's eyes that day, not love exactly, but hope. Hope that he could provide the stability their daughter deserved. The custody arrangement they'd worked out had seemed reasonable at the time. Emma would live with Rebecca in Denver, where Rebecca's sister had found her a job at a medical clinic, and Liam would have visitation rights every other weekend plus holidays. What they hadn't calculated was the hidden costs of divorce, the gas money for the 4-hour round trip to Denver, the need to maintain an apartment suitable for Emma's visits, the pressure to make every moment special when he only had 48 hours a month to be a father. The last time Emma had visited was 3 months ago, and the memory still kept Liam awake at night. She'd grown taller, her baby face beginning to show hints of the young woman she'd someday become, but more concerning was the distance in her eyes. She'd been polite, affectionate even, but there was a guardedness that hadn't been there before. When he'd asked about school, her friends, her favorite subjects, she'd answered in the careful way people used when talking to acquaintances rather than family. The breaking point of that visit came when they'd walked past the toy store on Millfields Main Street. Emma had pressed her face against the window, staring at a dollhouse that was far beyond Liam's budget. Without thinking, he'd promised they'd come back for it the next day, knowing full well he couldn't afford it, but unable to bear the disappointed look that would cross her face if he said no. That night, he'd lain awake calculating and recalculating his finances, wondering if he could skip meals for a week, if he could walk to work instead of driving, if there was any way to make the numbers work. The next morning, when they'd returned to the store, Liam had stood paralyzed in front of the cash register, his pride warring with his love for his daughter. Emma had watched him with those two wise eyes, and he'd seen the exact moment she understood. She'd gently taken his hand and told him she didn't really want the dollhouse after all, that she'd just been looking. But Liam had seen the lie for what it was. A 7-year-old protecting her father's feelings, a reversal of roles that cut deeper than any criticism Rebecca had ever leveled at him. The phone calls that followed Emma's visit had become increasingly sporadic. Rebecca claimed Emma was busy with school activities, new friends, dance classes they could afford, now that Rebecca had steady income and health insurance. But Liam suspected the truth was simpler and more painful. Emma was building a life that didn't include him, not because she didn't love him, but because it hurt too much to miss someone who felt increasingly like a stranger. The medical bills from Emma's emergency appendectomy 6 months ago had been the final blow to Liam's already strained finances. Rebecca had called him from the hospital, her voice tight with worry and exhaustion, explaining that Emma needed surgery and asking if he could help with the costs. The question had hung in the air between them, both knowing he couldn't afford it, but neither wanting to say it out loud. He'd emptied his savings account, borrowed against his next 3 paychecks, and still covered less than a quarter of the total bill. What haunted Liam most wasn't the money itself. It was the realization that he'd become a father who couldn't protect his daughter when she needed him most. He remembered sitting in that hospital waiting room, watching other families navigate the crisis together while he sat alone, feeling like an outsider in his own daughter's life. When Emma had woken up from surgery and reached for Rebecca's hand, instead of his, the message had been clear: he was becoming optional in her world. The divorce decree had given him legal rights to see Emma, but poverty was slowly stealing those rights away. Every missed visit because he couldn't afford gas, every cancelled phone call because his service had been temporarily disconnected, every birthday present that arrived late because he'd had to wait for payday, they all added up to a growing distance that no court order could bridge. Late at night, when the diner was closed and the apartment was silent, except for the dripping faucet and the occasional creak of settling wood, Liam would hold that photograph and remember the weight of Emma's small hand in his, the way she'd fall asleep on his chest during movie nights, the sound of her laughter echoing through their old house. He'd made mistakes, plenty of them, but he'd never stopped loving her with a fierce desperation that bordered on worship. The $20 bill in his wallet represented more than financial security. It was his connection to fatherhood itself. It meant he could answer the phone if Emma called asking him to come to a school play. It meant he could buy her a small gift on her next birthday. It meant maintaining the illusion that he was still capable of providing for her, even in the smallest ways. Without it, he wasn't just broke. He was admitting defeat in the only role that had ever truly mattered to him. This was the weight Liam carried as he moved through his days at the diner, serving coffee to truckers and listening to their stories of the road. Every dollar he earned was measured against the cost of being Emma's father. Every financial decision was filtered through the question of whether it brought him closer to or further from his daughter. The pressure was constant, exhausting, and absolutely inescapable. But perhaps the cruelest irony was that Emma had inherited his generous heart. Rebecca had mentioned in their last conversation that Emma had used her birthday money to buy supplies for a school fundraiser, helping families in need. She was growing up to be exactly the kind of person Liam had always hoped she'd become: compassionate, thoughtful, generous to a fault. And he was terrified that his own financial failures would teach her the wrong lessons about the value of kindness in a world that seemed to punish it at every turn. The afternoon shift at Mabel's diner had been slower than usual, even by Millfield standards. 3 truckers nursing coffee that had grown cold an hour ago, old Pete reading the same newspaper he'd been staring at since lunch, and Mrs. Chen counting quarters for her daily slice of apple pie. The tips jar by the register held exactly $4.37, barely enough to cover the gas it would take to drive to the grocery store, let alone buy anything once he got there. Liam wiped down the counter for the dozenth time. That day, his movements automatic after years of the same routine. The late October sun slanted through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. In a few hours, he'd flip the sign to closed, count the meager receipts, and climb the narrow stairs to his apartment, where he'd heat up a can of soup and try not to think about the bills waiting on his kitchen table. Mabel had left early for a doctor's appointment, her arthritis acting up again as the weather turned cold. At 73, she shouldn't be working 12-hour days trying to keep the diner afloat, but pride and stubbornness ran deep in her generation. She trusted Liam to handle the closing routine, knowing he'd lock up properly and make sure the coffee pot was cleaned for tomorrow's brew. It was a small responsibility, but in his current circumstances, even small responsibilities felt like victories. The bell above the door chimed with its familiar off-key clang, and Liam looked up from the coffee machine he'd been disassembling for cleaning. What he saw made him pause, his hands still holding the filter basket. A young woman stood silhouetted in the doorway, her thin frame backlit by the fading afternoon sun. She clutched a baby to her chest, the infant wrapped in what looked like a receiving blanket that had seen better months, if not years. Even from across the diner, Liam could see the exhaustion radiating from her like heat from asphalt. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that suggested it had been styled days ago and forgotten since. Her clothes were clean but wrinkled, the kind of wrinkled that came from sleeping in a car rather than careless laundry habits. But it was her eyes that stopped Liam cold, wide, desperate, and trying so hard to mask the fear that it hurt to look at her directly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The baby stirred in her arms, making the soft whimpering sounds that preceded a full-scale crying fit. "Are you still serving? I know it's almost closing time, but—" "Of course," Liam said quickly, setting down the coffee filter and moving toward the counter. "Take any seat you'd like. Can I get you some coffee while you look at the menu?" The woman, she couldn't have been more than 25, glanced around the diner as if calculating escape routes. When her gaze landed on the prices listed on the chalkboard menu, Liam saw her shoulders sag almost imperceptibly. She approached the counter slowly, bouncing the baby gently to keep her quiet. "Actually," she said, her voice growing smaller, "I was wondering, do you have anything that's not too expensive? I have about $6, and I haven't eaten since yesterday, and Grace here." She looked down at the baby with an expression of such tender desperation that Liam felt his chest tighten. "She's been fussy because I'm not producing enough milk, and I thought maybe if I could just get something in my stomach." The sentence trailed off into silence, and Liam found himself looking at a young mother who was quite literally at the end of her rope. Her hands trembled slightly as she shifted the baby's weight, and he could see the careful calculation in her eyes as she mentally counted and recounted the crumpled bills in her jacket pocket. "What's your name?" Liam asked gently. "Serenity," she replied, then added quickly, "Serenity Fuller, and this is Grace." She adjusted the blanket around the baby, who had begun making stronger protest sounds. "She's 4 months old." Liam nodded toward the booth nearest the kitchen. "Why don't you sit down, Serenity? Let me get you both something." He moved with quiet efficiency, filling a plate with the last of the day's meatloaf, a generous scoop of mashed potatoes, green beans, and a warm dinner roll. It was easily $15 worth of food by menu standards, but Liam didn't hesitate. He poured a tall glass of milk and a cup of coffee, adding sugar packets and creamer to a small dish. When he set it all in front of Serenity, her eyes immediately filled with tears. "I can't afford all this," she whispered, looking down at the steaming plate. "I told you, I only have $6. Then $6 is what it costs, Liam said simply. He pulled out a chair across from her and sat down, noting how she immediately began eating with the focused intensity of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. "Where are you headed?" Serenity swallowed a bite of meatloaf before answering. "North. My sister lives in Wyoming, near Cheyenne. She's got a spare room and said Grace and I could stay with her while I get back on my feet." She paused, looking embarrassed. "My car broke down about 50 miles south of here. A trucker gave us a ride into town, but..." She didn't need to finish. Liam could fill in the blanks. No money for repairs, no money for bus tickets, no money for anything except the hope that kindness existed somewhere along the highway between desperation and salvation. "How long since the car broke down?" he asked. 3 days. Serenity's voice was barely audible. "We've been staying at the rest stop, but security keeps moving us along. Grace cries when she's hungry, and I've been trying to walk to find work. But nobody's hiring, and I can't leave her alone." The picture she painted was heartbreaking in its simple desperation. A young mother stranded in a town that barely had enough opportunities for its own residents, carrying a baby who depended entirely on her ability to survive in circumstances that would challenge anyone. Liam found himself thinking of Emma, imagining his daughter in 20 years, wondering if she'd ever find herself in a similar situation with no one to help. As Serenity ate, she told him fragments of her story. A boyfriend who'd disappeared when... She told him she was pregnant, a job at a warehouse that had laid her off when the baby was born, and she couldn't arrange reliable childcare. An eviction notice that had forced her to choose between fighting in court and using her last savings to get to Wyoming, where family waited. Each detail was delivered matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but the cumulative weight of her circumstances was staggering. "The trucker who gave us a ride was kind," she said, finishing the last of the green beans. "But he was heading east, and this was as far as he could take us. He gave me the $6 for food and wished us luck." She looked down at Grace, who had fallen asleep in her arms. "I've been trying to figure out how to get to Cheyenne ever since." Liam excused himself and walked to the window, looking out. At the parking lot where Serenity's absence of transportation was glaringly obvious, the nearest bus station was in Denver, 60 miles away. Even if there was a route to Cheyenne from there, it would cost far more than $6. He thought about the $20 bill in his wallet, his safety net, his connection to Emma, his insurance against complete catastrophe. When he returned to the table, Serenity was attempting to pay for her meal, counting out wrinkled dollar bills and loose change with the precision of someone for whom every penny mattered. The sight of her trying to make good on her debt, even in her desperate circumstances, confirmed what Liam had already decided. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the $20 bill, setting it on the table next to her money. "Take this," he said quietly. Serenity's eyes widened. "No, I can't. You've already done too much." "You need it more than I do," Liam said. And in that moment, he meant it completely. Looking at this young mother holding her sleeping baby, calculating bus fares and baby formula and all the small necessities that stood between her and safety, his own problems suddenly felt manageable. Get to your sister, get somewhere safe. The gratitude in Serenity's eyes was almost too much to bear. She carefully folded the $20 bill and tucked it into her jacket pocket, then stood and extended her hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll find a way to pay you back someday." Liam shook her hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work and determination. "Just take care of that little girl," he said. "That's payment enough." As he watched Serenity Fuller walk out of the diner and into the uncertain evening, Liam Smith had no idea that he'd just set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. He only knew that he'd chosen to be the kind of person he wanted Emma to be proud of, even if Emma might never know about it. The days following Serenity's departure passed with an unusual heaviness that Liam couldn't quite shake. He'd given away his last $20 without a second thought, but the reality of that decision settled into his bones like the Colorado mountain cold that was beginning to creep into October nights. His wallet now contained exactly $3.47, the remainder of that day's tips, and payday was still 5 days away. For the first time in months, Liam found himself genuinely wondering if he'd made a mistake. Not in helping Serenity, that felt as right as breathing, but in giving away money he couldn't afford to lose. The grocery shopping he'd planned for the weekend would have to wait. The phone bill that was due in 3 days would go unpaid, meaning another embarrassing conversation with the customer service representative who'd begun to recognize his voice. Most painful of all, Emma had called the night before, excited about a school Halloween carnival, and he'd had to explain why he couldn't drive up to see her costume. "It's okay, Daddy," Emma had said, with a kind of mature understanding that broke his heart. "Maybe you can come for Thanksgiving instead." But Thanksgiving was still a month away, and Liam wasn't sure his finances would be any better by then. He'd hung up the phone, feeling like he'd failed her again, trading his daughter's happiness for a stranger's survival. The rational part of his mind knew he'd done the right thing, but late at night, when the apartment was silent except for the dripping faucet and his own doubts, rationality felt like cold comfort. It was Wednesday morning, 6 days after Serenity had left, when the first sign appeared that the universe might be keeping accounts after all. Liam was opening the diner, going through the familiar ritual of firing up the coffee machine and checking yesterday's receipts, when he noticed a man sitting at the counter he was certain hadn't been there moments before. "Morning," the stranger said, looking up from a newspaper that hadn't been there either. He was perhaps 60, well-dressed in the understated way that suggested money without ostentation. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, his hands manicured, but his eyes held the kind of warmth that came from genuine kindness rather than practiced politeness. "Hope you don't mind." The door was unlocked, and I saw the coffee was ready. Liam glanced at the front door, certain he'd locked it the night before, but decided not to question small mysteries. "No problem at all. What can I get you?" "Coffees. Perfect for now," the man said, extending his hand. "Name's Owen Adams. I'm passing through town on business and someone recommended this place. Said the food was good and the owner was an honest man." Liam shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. "Liam Smith. I'm not the owner. Just work here. But I'll take the compliment about the food. Mabel Henderson owns the place. She's been serving good meals here for 40 years. Owen nodded approvingly as he sipped his coffee. "Sometimes the best places are the ones that have been around long enough to know what they're doing. Speaking of which, I'm actually looking for someone, a young woman with a baby, traveling north from here about a week ago. Dark hair, probably looked like she needed help. You wouldn't happen to remember seeing anyone like that?" Liam's hand stilled on the coffee pot he'd been refilling. "May I ask why you're looking for her?" "Good question," Owen said, smiling at what seemed to be approval for Liam's caution. "I represent a foundation that helps young mothers in crisis situations. We heard through some channels that she might have been in this area, and we wanted to make sure she and her baby were safe." The explanation felt genuine, but Liam had learned to be protective of people who trusted him. "What kind of foundation?" Owen reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "The Grace Foundation. We provide emergency assistance, temporary housing, job training, that sort of thing, all completely confidential, no strings attached." He paused, studying Liam's face. "You did meet her, didn't you?" Liam looked at the business card, noting the professional printing and Denver address. Something about Owen Adams felt trustworthy, but more than that, something felt almost familiar, though Liam was certain they'd never met. "She was here about a week ago. Nice girl, traveling with her baby to family in Wyoming. She seemed to be getting by okay." "That's good to hear," Owen said, though his expression suggested he was reading between the lines. These situations can be challenging. Sometimes people need more help than they're comfortable asking for. She handled herself with dignity. Liam said carefully, "Whatever help she needed, I hope she found it." Owen studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'm sure she did. People like that usually recognize kindness when they encounter it." He finished his coffee and reached for his wallet. "What do I owe you?" "Coffee's on the house," Liam said automatically, the words coming out before he'd consciously decided to say them. It was a $2 loss he couldn't afford, but something about the interaction felt important in a way he couldn't explain. Owen looked at him with an expression that seemed to contain both surprise and something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, or approval. "That's very generous. Thank you." He stood to leave, then paused. "You know, I have a feeling that young woman you helped is going to do well for herself. And I have an even stronger feeling that the kindness people showed her along the way is going to come back to them in ways they can't imagine." After Owen left, Liam found himself replaying the conversation throughout the morning. There had been something almost orchestrated about the encounter, as if Owen Adams had been looking not just for information about Serenity, but testing something about Liam himself. The business card sat on the counter next to the register, and every time Liam glanced at it, he felt a strange mixture of hope and anticipation. The lunch rush was busier than usual. A tour bus had broken down just outside town, bringing 30 unexpected customers who ordered everything from burgers to apple pie. Liam worked frantically to keep up with orders while Mabel handled the register. And for the first time in weeks, the tips jar was heavy with bills and coins. When the last tourist had climbed back onto the repaired bus, Liam counted his earnings. With something approaching disbelief, $63 in tips, more than he usually made in a week. "Oh, well, I'll be," Mabel said, counting the day's receipts. "Haven't seen numbers like this since the mine was running. Maybe we should put a broken bus stop on the schedule every week." That evening, as Liam climbed the stairs to his apartment, he found an envelope that had been slipped under his door. His name was written on the front in unfamiliar handwriting, and inside was a brief note along with a $50 gift certificate to the grocery store in the next town over. "Mr. Smith," the note read, "a friend mentioned that you recently helped someone in need. This small token comes with gratitude from people who believe kindness should never go unrewarded. Please use this for yourself and know that good deeds create ripples that travel farther than we ever imagine." There was no signature, no return address, just the gift certificate and the growing certainty that his act of generosity towards Serenity was somehow connected to the sudden improvements in his circumstances. Liam sat on his narrow bed, holding the note and feeling something he hadn't experienced in months, the possibility that the universe might actually be fair after all. The next morning brought another surprise. Owen Adams was back, sitting in the same booth, reading what appeared to be the same newspaper. But this time he wasn't alone. A well-dressed woman sat across from him, and when she looked up as Liam approached, her smile was warm and immediate. "Mr. Smith," Owen said, standing to shake hands again, "I'd like you to meet my colleague, Julia Murray. She's the director of our foundation, and she wanted to thank you personally." "Thank you personally." Julia extended her hand with the kind of professional warmth that suggested genuine caring behind the business demeanor. "Mr. Adams told me about your conversation yesterday, and frankly, about your generosity with the coffee. In our line of work, we don't often get to thank the people who make the real difference in crisis situations." "I didn't do anything special," Liam said, uncomfortable with the attention. "That's exactly what makes it special," Julia replied. "Mr. Smith, we've been able to connect with the young woman you helped. She's safe, she's with family, and she wanted us to tell you that your kindness gave her hope when she needed it most." Liam felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. "She doesn't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would do." "But that's where you're wrong," Owen said gently. "Not everyone would do what you did. That's precisely why we're here." The conversation that followed would change everything. Julia Murray opened a leather portfolio and withdrew a folder that looked far too official for a casual conversation in a small-town diner. Liam felt his stomach tighten with the kind of anxiety that came from years of unexpected documents bringing bad news. Eviction notices, final demands, legal papers that always seemed to arrive at the worst possible moments. "Mr. Smith," Julia began, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to delivering life-changing information. "What I'm about to share with you might sound unusual, but I hope you'll hear me out completely before you respond." Liam nodded, his hands instinctively reaching for the coffee cup in front of him as an anchor against whatever was coming. Owen sat quietly beside Julia, but there was something in his expression that suggested he was as invested in this conversation as she was. "The Grace Foundation isn't just any charitable organization," Julia continued. "We were established by someone who believes that genuine kindness should be rewarded in tangible ways. Our benefactor prefers to remain anonymous, but they've built a substantial endowment specifically to help people who demonstrate extraordinary generosity, especially when that generosity comes at personal cost." She paused, allowing the words to settle. Liam found himself thinking of late-night infomercials and too-good-to-be-true sweepstakes offers. But the business cards were real. Julia's professional demeanor was convincing, and something in Owen's eyes suggested this was anything but a scam. "When Serenity Fuller contacted us for assistance," Julia went on, "she mentioned a man in Millfield who had given her his last $20 without expecting anything in return. She was quite specific about the circumstances, how you fed, how when she was hungry, how you could clearly see she had nothing to offer in return, how you gave her money that she suspected you couldn't afford to lose." Liam's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "She didn't need to tell anyone about that. I wasn't looking for credit or—" "Of course you weren't," Owen interrupted gently. "That's exactly the point. Serenity told us because she was grateful, and because she wanted to make sure that if there was any way to pay your kindness forward, we would know where to find you." Julia smiled and opened the folder. "Mr. Smith, our foundation has investigated your situation. I hope you don't mind, but we needed to verify both your circumstances and your character. What we found was remarkable. A single father working multiple jobs to support himself and maintain a relationship with his daughter. A man who's never defaulted on a debt despite financial hardship. Someone who's helped neighbors with snow removal, assisted elderly customers with their groceries, and never once complained about his circumstances to anyone who could help him." The description felt surreal, as if they were talking about someone else entirely. Liam had never thought of his actions as remarkable. They were simply what decent people did when they could manage it. "You don't understand what you're getting at," he said honestly. "We'd like to offer you a partnership," Julia said simply. "The Grace Foundation is expanding its operations, and we need someone to manage our rural outreach program for this region of Colorado. Someone who understands what it's like to struggle, who recognizes genuine need when they see it, and who has a proven track record of putting others' welfare ahead of their own comfort." Liam stared at her, certain he'd misunderstood. "You're offering me a job?" "We're offering you a calling," Owen corrected. "The position would involve identifying families and individuals in crisis throughout small communities like Millfield. You'd have a budget to provide immediate assistance, food, temporary housing, transportation, emergency funds. You'd also coordinate with local businesses and organizations to create longer-term support systems." Julia pulled out a document that made Liam's eyes widen. The starting salary would be $65,000 annually, plus benefits, plus a discretionary fund of $50,000 yearly for emergency assistance. You'd work primarily from Millfield, traveling to neighboring communities as needed. And Mr. Smith, this isn't charity. This is employment. We've researched your background, your character, your judgment. We believe you're exactly the person we need for this position. The numbers seem to float in the air between them, too large and too wonderful to be real. $65,000 was more than Liam had made in the past 3 years combined. It was Emma's college fund, stable housing, the ability to visit his daughter whenever she needed him. It was the difference between surviving and living. "I don't have any formal education in social work," Liam said, his practical mind automatically searching for the catch. "I never went to college, never worked for a non-profit. I'm just a guy who works in a diner." "You have something more valuable than formal education," Julia replied. "You have lived experience with hardship, natural empathy, and most importantly, the judgment to give away your last $20 to someone who needed it more than you did. Those qualities can't be taught in any classroom." Owen leaned forward. "Liam, may I ask you something personal? When you gave Serenity that money, what went through your mind?" Liam thought back to that moment, remembering the weight of the $20 bill in his hand and the desperation in Serenity's eyes. "I thought about my daughter," he said quietly. "I thought about how I'd want someone to help her if she were ever in that situation. And I thought about the kind of person I want to be, regardless of whether anyone's watching. That," Julia said with obvious satisfaction, "is exactly why you're perfect for this job." The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical details that seemed almost mundane compared to the magnitude of what was being offered. Liam would start immediately, working out of a small office they'd established in Millfield. He'd received training in crisis intervention and resource management, but much of the work would rely on his natural instincts and local knowledge. Most importantly, he'd have the resources to help people like Serenity before they reached the point of desperation. "There's one more thing," Owen said as they prepared to leave. "The Foundation's benefactor wanted us to give you this personally." He handed Liam an envelope that felt substantial in his hands. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note. "Mr. Smith, this represents the immediate return on your investment in human kindness. The young woman you helped wanted to pay you back but didn't have the means. Consider this a down payment on all the good you're going to do in the world. With gratitude, a friend." Liam stared at the check, then at Julia and Owen, then back at the check. "This is real? All of this is actually happening?" "It's real," Julia confirmed. "We'll have contracts and paperwork ready by tomorrow, and you can start as soon as you're ready. There's just one question. Are you interested in changing your life and the lives of countless others?" Liam thought about Emma, about the conversation they'd have when he told her he could afford to visit every weekend. He thought about Mabel, struggling to keep the diner afloat, and how he might be able to help her access resources she didn't know existed. He thought about all the Serenity Fullers out there, trapped between pride and desperation, needing just enough help to get back on their feet. "Yes," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Yes, I'm very interested." As Julia and Owen gathered their materials and prepared to leave, Owen paused at the door. "Liam, I want you to know something. The young woman you helped, Serenity, she's enrolled in nursing school now. Full scholarship, housing provided, childcare arranged. She's going to be fine, and she wanted you to know that none of it would have been possible without the hope you gave her in this diner." After they left, Liam sat alone in the empty diner, holding the check and trying to process what had just happened. The $20 he'd given away a week ago had somehow multiplied into opportunities he'd never dared to dream of. But more than the money, more than the job, was the realization that his simple act of kindness had created ripples that were still spreading, touching lives he might never even know about. When Mabel returned from her errands and found him sitting in contemplative silence, she took one look at his face and smiled. "Good news, I take it?" "The best," Liam replied, thinking about the phone call he was about to make to Emma. "Mabel, how would you feel about having a partner in this place? Someone who could help you expand, maybe hire more staff, reach more people. The conversation that followed was just the beginning of transformations that would touch not just Liam's life, but the entire community of Millfield, Colorado. Sometimes miracles didn't announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they simply walked into a diner, ordered coffee, and offered a man the chance to turn his generosity into his life's work. 3 weeks after signing the contracts that officially made him the regional coordinator for the Grace Foundation's rural outreach program, Liam Smith stood in what had once been the vacant storefront next to Miller's Hardware, watching workers install the sign that would change everything. Millfield Community Resource Center, a Grace Foundation initiative. The transformation had been swift but thoughtful. Julia Murray and her team had worked with local contractors to convert the empty space into something that felt both professional and welcoming. Comfortable seating areas where families could meet privately with counselors, a children's play, corner with books and toys, a small kitchen for emergency food preparation, and offices for the growing staff that Liam was gradually assembling. But the real transformation wasn't in the building. It was in the people gathering around the shared vision of what Millfield could become. Mabel Henderson had been the first to embrace the possibility. When Liam had approached her about partnering with the foundation to expand the diner's reach, her eyes had lit up with an enthusiasm he hadn't seen since the mine closed. The Grace Foundation had provided funding to renovate Mabel's kitchen, hire 2 additional staff members, and establish a program where the diner would provide free meals to families in crisis while being fully compensated for their costs. 40 years I've been feeding people in this town, Mabel had said, wiping tears from her eyes as she signed the partnership agreement. Never thought I'd see the day when I could feed the ones who needed it most without worrying about keeping the lights on. The diner had become the unofficial headquarters for community planning sessions, and it was there that Liam had met the people who would help shape Millfield's future. Dr. Patricia Winters, the semi-retired physician who had been driving to the next county for medical emergencies, was eager to establish a part-time clinic. Roberto Silva, the former mine supervisor who had been struggling to find work, jumped at the chance to coordinate job training programs. Even Pastor Michael from the community church had volunteered to help with counseling services and temporary housing coordination. But perhaps the most unexpected ally came in the form of Frank Kelly, a businessman from Denver who had grown up in Millfield before the mine closed. Frank had made his fortune in construction and development, but when news of the Grace Foundation's initiative reached him through business networks, he'd driven down to see the changes firsthand. "I thought this place was dead," Frank had admitted during his first meeting with Liam. "Drove through here 2 years ago and figured it would be a ghost town within a decade. But what you're building here, this isn't just charity. This is smart development. You're creating sustainable systems." Frank's involvement brought a level of business expertise that complemented the foundation's resources perfectly. He understood how to create economic opportunities that wouldn't disappear when grant funding ended. More importantly, he understood the pride of small-town people who wanted to earn their way forward, not just receive handouts. The planning sessions at Mabel's Diner had evolved into something remarkable. Every Tuesday evening, a diverse group of residents would gather around pushed-together tables, sharing coffee and ideas for rebuilding their community. Liam facilitated these meetings, but the vision was emerging organically from people who had lived through Millfield's decline and were determined to engineer its recovery. Sarah Martinez, a young teacher who had been considering leaving for opportunities in larger cities, proposed an adult education program that could help residents earn GEDs and trade certifications. Her husband Carlos, a skilled mechanic, suggested a community garage where people could learn automotive repair while fixing vehicles for families who couldn't afford commercial rates. Even old Pete, the regular customer who spent most days reading newspapers at the diner, contributed by offering to organize a community garden on the vacant lots that dotted the town. But the breakthrough moment came when Emma arrived for her weekend visit and witnessed one of these planning sessions firsthand. Liam had been nervous about Emma seeing him in his new role. The job with the Grace Foundation had already begun changing their relationship. He could afford to visit her every other weekend now, and their phone conversations had shifted from careful discussions about money to excited planning about the future. But he wasn't sure how his 9-year-old daughter would understand the work he was doing, or why it mattered so much to him. Emma had sat quietly at a corner table, coloring in a workbook, while the adults discussed funding for a community daycare center. But when the conversation turned to how they could help families with young people who were struggling in school, she looked up from her artwork. "Daddy," she said in the clear voice that always made the room go quiet, "remember when you used to help me with my math homework? And how you always said that sometimes people just need someone to believe they can do it?" Liam nodded, unsure where she was heading, but touched by the memory. "Maybe the kids here need someone to believe in them too," Emma continued. "Maybe they need homework helpers like you used to be for me." The silence that followed was profound. Then Dr. Winters spoke up. "That's brilliant. A peer tutoring program, maybe pairing high school students with elementary kids, supervised by adults who can provide guidance and encouragement." Frank Kelly was already making notes. "We could create a scholarship fund for the high school tutors, maybe even pathways to community college for the ones who show leadership potential." Sarah Martinez was nodding enthusiastically. "And it could extend beyond academics. Life skills, career exploration, mentorship relationships that could last for years." What had started as a child's innocent observation was rapidly becoming a comprehensive youth development program. But more than that, Emma's comment had crystallized something essential about their shared vision. This wasn't about fixing problems from the outside, but about recognizing and nurturing the strengths that already existed within the community. Later that evening, after the planning session had wound down and the other participants had headed home, Liam and Emma walked through downtown Millfield. The streets were quiet, but there were lights in windows that had been dark for years, and several storefronts that had recently been rented by small businesses taking advantage of the foundation's microloan program. "Daddy," Emma said, slipping her hand into his, "are you happy now?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about the past few weeks, the satisfaction of helping 3 families avoid eviction, the joy of watching Mabel hire her niece as a full-time waitress, the hope in people's faces when they talked about Millfield's future. "Yes, sweetheart," he said honestly. "I think I am." "Good," Emma replied with the matter-of-fact wisdom that children possessed. "Because when you gave that lady your money, I think you planted something good, and now it's growing into something really big." As they walked past the construction site where the community center was taking shape, Liam realized Emma was right. The $20 he'd given to Serenity Fuller hadn't just helped one struggling mother, it had planted a seed that was growing into something none of them could have imagined. A community garden where both vegetables and relationships could flourish, a resource center where crisis intervention could become empowerment, a network of people who had discovered that their individual struggles were actually shared challenges with collective solutions. The shared vision was no longer just about helping people survive difficult circumstances. It was about creating A place where kindness could multiply, where generosity could become sustainable, where people could build something together that was stronger and more beautiful than anything they could create alone. That night, as Liam tucked Emma into the new bed in the apartment they could finally afford to make comfortable, she asked one more question. "Daddy, do you think that lady you helped knows about all the good things that happened because of what you did?" Liam smiled, thinking about the updates Julia Murray had shared about Serenity's progress in nursing school. "I think she does, sweetheart. And I think she'd be proud to know that her courage to accept help when she needed it helped create all of this." The vision they were building in Millfield wasn't just about individual transformation. It was about proving that communities could heal themselves when people chose to invest in each other's success. And it had all started with a $20 bill and the simple belief that everyone deserved a chance to hope again. 6 months into the Grace Foundation's presence in Millfield, just when it seemed like the transformation was taking permanent root, the first real test arrived in the form of a letter that landed on Liam's desk with the weight of a thunderbolt. The letterhead read, "Colorado Department of Social Services, Fraud Investigation Unit," and the words that followed threatened to unravel everything they had built. "We have received complaints regarding irregular funding practices and potential misappropriation of charitable resources," the letter stated in bureaucratic language that somehow managed to sound both vague and menacing. "An investigation has been opened to examine the financial practices of the Grace Foundation's Millfield operations. All programs must be suspended pending the completion of this review." Liam read the letter 3 times, his hands trembling slightly as the implications sank in. Someone had reported them to the state, claiming that the Foundation's methods were suspicious, that the rapid transformation of Millfield was too good to be true, that money was being funneled inappropriately. The investigation would take months, during which time they couldn't provide emergency assistance, couldn't fund the community programs, couldn't continue the work that had begun to give people hope. The timing couldn't have been worse. Winter was settling into the Colorado mountains with unusual harshness, and 3 families were depending on Foundation assistance to keep their heat on. The community daycare was scheduled to open in 2 weeks, providing care for 15 local families who had already adjusted their work schedules around the new service. The adult education program had 22 enrolled students who were halfway through earning their GEDs. But beyond the immediate practical concerns was something even more devastating: the doubt that crept into people's voices when they heard the news. After years of disappointment and broken promises, Millfield residents had finally begun to believe that change was possible. Now, faced with official government letterhead suggesting fraud and mismanagement, that fragile hope was beginning to crack. The news spread through town with the speed that bad news always traveled in small communities. By the afternoon of the day Liam received the letter, Mabel's Diner had become an unofficial crisis center where worried residents gathered to share information and fears. "I knew it was too good to be true," muttered Jim Brennan, a rancher who had been skeptical of the Foundation from the beginning. "Nobody just shows up with that kind of money without strings attached. There's always a catch." Others were more defensive, but equally worried. Sarah Martinez sat at a corner table with her husband Carlos, their faces etched with the kind of concern that came from having too much to lose. The adult education program wasn't just an opportunity for them, it was their pathway to better jobs and a more stable future for their family. "What if they shut everything down?" Sarah asked quietly. "What if we're back to where we started, but now with expectations we can't meet?" Dr. Winters had driven over from her clinic as soon as she heard, her medical bag still in hand from afternoon house calls. "This doesn't make sense," she said, addressing the room as much as any individual. "I've seen the Foundation's books. Julia Murray has been completely transparent about funding sources and expenditures. Everything has been documented and above board." But documentation and transparency meant little when faced with a government investigation. Even if the Foundation was completely cleared of wrongdoing, the process could take months or even years. Communities that had survived on hope and momentum could easily collapse under the weight of bureaucratic uncertainty. Frank Kelly had driven down from Denver as soon as Liam called him, and his assessment was grimly practical. "Investigations like this can be triggered by anonymous complaints," he explained to the gathered group. "Someone who doesn't like what's happening here, someone who feels threatened by change, could have called in a report just to cause trouble." The suggestion that their community transformation was being sabotaged by outsiders brought a different kind of anger to the room. But it also raised uncomfortable questions about whether they had moved too fast, been too visible, attracted the wrong kind of attention. Old Pete, who had been listening quietly from his usual spot at the counter, finally spoke up. "So, what do we do? Give up? Go back to watching this place die one empty storefront at a time?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Liam looked around the room at faces that had become familiar over the months. People who had invested their hopes in a vision that now seemed threatened by forces beyond their control. He thought about Emma, who had been so proud of the tutoring program she had inspired. He thought about Serenity Fuller, whose courage to accept help had started this entire chain of events. He thought about the $20 bill that had somehow multiplied into resources that could transform an entire community. "We proved them wrong," Liam said quietly, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "We show them that this community doesn't need outside validation to take care of its own people." The room went silent, waiting for him to continue. "The investigation is about the Foundation's money and programs," Liam explained. "But the Foundation didn't create the relationships in this room. It didn't create your skills, your knowledge, your willingness to help each other. Those things belong to us, and no government agency can take them away." Dr. Winters was the first to understand where he was heading. "A community-supported emergency fund," she said slowly. "We pool our own resources to help families in immediate crisis." Frank Kelly nodded approvingly. "And the daycare doesn't need Foundation funding to operate if parents organize cooperatively and share costs and responsibilities." Sarah Martinez stood up, her voice stronger than it had been all afternoon. "The adult education classes can continue at the church. We don't need fancy equipment. We need teachers and students who are committed to learning." What followed was 2 hours of the most intense community planning Millfield had ever experienced. People who had learned to depend on Foundation resources discovered they had more power than they realized. Carlos Martinez could teach automotive repair in his own garage. Dr. Winters could provide basic medical services on a sliding scale that people could actually afford. Pastor Michael's church could host not just education classes, but support groups and community meetings. The challenge that had seemed like a potential death blow was transforming into an opportunity for the community to prove its resilience. But more than that, it was forcing them to confront a fundamental question. Were they building something that could survive without external support? Or had they simply become dependent on a different kind of charity? As the evening wore on and plans took shape, Liam realized that the investigation might be the best thing that could have happened to them. Not because he welcomed the stress and uncertainty, but because it was forcing Millfield to discover its own strength. The Grace Foundation had provided crucial seed funding and initial support, but the real transformation had always been in the people themselves, their willingness to work together, to support each other, to believe that change was possible. The meeting ended with commitments that surprised everyone. Jim Brennan, the skeptical rancher, volunteered to coordinate winter heating assistance using his own network of suppliers. Families pledged monthly contributions to a community emergency fund. Business owners offered space and resources for continuing programs. "You know what?" old Pete said, as people began gathering their coats and heading home. "Maybe we needed this wake-up call. Maybe we needed to find out we could stand on our own 2 feet. But as Liam locked up the community center that night, he couldn't shake the worry that they were about to find out just how much they could endure. The investigation was real, the threat to their progress was serious, and not everyone in the community had the resilience to weather months of uncertainty. The next few weeks would determine whether the miracle that had begun with $20 was strong enough to survive its first real test. The answer came on a snow-covered Tuesday morning in February, 3 months after the investigation had begun, and 2 weeks after the community had quietly celebrated their first self-funded success. Story: Maria Santos, a single mother of 2 who had been struggling to keep her heat on, had been helped not by foundation money, but by the community emergency fund that neighbors had contributed to from their own paychecks. The heating bill was paid. Maria kept her job at the grocery store, and her children stayed in their home and school. Liam was reviewing the week's volunteer schedules at the community center when Julia Murray walked through the door, her usual professional composure replaced by something that looked remarkably like excitement. Behind her came Owen Adams and a woman Liam didn't recognize, elderly, elegantly dressed, with the kind of quiet authority that suggested she was accustomed to being listened to. "Liam," Julia said without preamble, "I'd like you to meet Eleanor." Hartwell, the name meant nothing to Liam initially, but something in the way Julia said it suggested it should. Eleanor stepped forward with a warm smile and an outstretched hand. "Mr. Smith," she said, her voice carrying the refined cadence of old money and careful education, "I've been looking forward to meeting the man who started all of this with $20 and a generous heart." The pieces began clicking into place as Eleanor continued speaking. "I'm the benefactor behind the Grace Foundation. I prefer to stay behind the scenes usually, but recent events have made a more direct approach necessary." Liam stared at her, trying to reconcile this grandmother-like vigor with the mysterious force that had transformed his life and his community. "You're the person behi, a person behi." Eleanor's smile deepened. "I'm the person who provided the initial funding, yes, but you're the person who proved the concept works. Mr. Smith, what you and your community have accomplished during this investigation has been extraordinary." She gestured toward the chairs arranged in the center's main meeting area. "May we sit? I have quite a story to tell you, and some news that I think will interest you greatly." As they settled into the comfortable chairs that had hosted hundreds of community conversations over the past months, Eleanor began to speak with the measured pace of someone who had thought carefully about every word. 50 years ago, I was a young mother stranded on the side of a highway in Kansas with a sick baby and no money for a mechanic. A farmer stopped to help us, a man who clearly had very little himself, but who spent his last $10 to get our car running and refused to let us repay him. She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "That man's kindness saved my daughter's life and taught me something fundamental about human nature." Eleanor reached into her purse and withdrew a yellowed piece of paper. "I wrote him a letter years later, after my husband's business had succeeded and we had the means to give back. I wanted to find him, to repay his kindness, but he had passed away and his family had scattered. So I decided to do something different." She handed Liam the letter, and he could see it was addressed to the farmer who stopped for a stranger's family. The letter promised to find ways to reward unexpected kindness wherever it appeared. "The Grace Foundation has been operating for 30 years, Eleanor continued. "We identify people like you, people who give when they can't afford to give, who help without expectation of return. Usually, we provide quiet assistance, paying off medical bills, funding educational opportunities, providing business loans that never need to be repaid. But your situation was different. Owen spoke up for the first time. When Serenity Fuller contacted us and told us about your $20, Eleanor became personally invested. She wanted to see what would happen if we didn't just reward individual kindness, but empowered it to transform an entire community. "And the investigation?" Liam asked. Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. The investigation was initiated by a complaint from Harold Westbrook, a property developer who had been planning to buy up Millfield's main street at distressed prices for a shopping complex. Your community's revitalization threatened his plans, so he decided to try to shut you down with bureaucratic harassment. Julia opened her portfolio and withdrew a thick folder. The state completed their investigation last week. Not only did they find no evidence of wrongdoing, but they were so impressed with our documentation and community impact that they're recommending the Grace Foundation model for statewide implementation. The relief that flooded through Liam was so intense, it was almost overwhelming. Months of uncertainty, community stress, and personal doubt suddenly lifted like fog clearing from a mountain valley. But Eleanor wasn't finished. Mr. Smith, the investigation did reveal something significant. It showed that your community doesn't need the Grace Foundation anymore. You've created something sustainable, something that can grow and thrive independently. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew another folder, which is why I'm here to make you an offer that's different from anything the Grace Foundation has done before. Eleanor opened the folder to reveal documents that made Liam's eyes widen. I'm establishing the Millfield Model Institute, a permanent endowment of $10 million dedicated to researching and replicating what you've accomplished here. The institute will be headquartered in Millfield, with you as its director, tasked with helping other struggling communities discover their own capacity for transformation. The numbers were staggering, but more significant was the implication. Millfield wouldn't just be saved, it would become a beacon for community revival across the country. But that's not all, Eleanor continued. Harold Westbrook, the developer, who tried to shut you down, has had a change of heart. Facing negative publicity for trying to sabotage a successful community revitalization project, he's offered to sell his development rights to the community at cost, along with funding for a community land trust that will ensure Millfield controls its own growth. Frank Kelly, who had arrived quietly during the conversation, was shaking his head in amazement. Eleanor, what you're describing isn't just community development, it's community sovereignty. You're giving them permanent protection against future exploitation. Exactly, Eleanor said with obvious satisfaction. Mr. Smith, your $20 has grown into something I never anticipated when we started this process. You've proven that communities can heal themselves when given the right support and encouragement. Liam thought about the journey from that moment in the diner when he'd handed Serenity his last $20 to this moment when he was being offered the resources to help countless other communities. The multiplication was almost incomprehensible. There's one more thing, Eleanor said, her voice softening. Serenity Fuller wanted to be here today, but her nursing school schedule wouldn't allow it. However, she did send this. Eleanor handed Liam an envelope addressed in handwriting he recognized from the thank you note Serenity had left at the diner. Inside was a photograph of a young woman in nursing scrubs, holding her diploma, with a beautiful little girl at her side. On the back, Serenity had written, Mr. Smith, because of your kindness, I'm now a registered nurse working in pediatric care. Grace and I will never forget that you saw us as worthy of help when we couldn't see it ourselves. Your $20 taught me that kindness multiplies. I'm spending my life proving you right. As Liam held the photograph, surrounded by people who had become family and contemplating opportunities that had grown from a simple act of generosity, he realized that the real breakthrough wasn't the money or the recognition or even the vindication. The real breakthrough was the understanding that kindness was indeed the most powerful force in the universe, not because it always brought immediate rewards, but because it created connections that could transform the world. The investigation that had threatened to destroy everything had actually proven the opposite, that what they had built was real, sustainable, and worthy of replication. The attempt to stop their progress had instead accelerated it beyond anything they had dared to imagine. 1 year after Eleanor Hartwell's visit, the Millfield Model Institute had become a pilgrimage site for community leaders, social workers, and policymakers from across the nation. But more importantly, it had become the epicenter of a movement that was spreading through small towns and forgotten neighborhoods like seeds carried on a favorable wind. Liam stood in the Institute's main conference room, looking out at representatives from 23 communities who had traveled to Colorado to learn how they could replicate Millfield's transformation. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now teaching people how to accomplish what he had stumbled into by accident, starting with nothing more than a heart that couldn't ignore another person's need. The most important thing to understand, Liam was saying to the assembled group, is that we didn't save Millfield with outside money or expert consultants. We saved it by recognizing that every community already has the resources it needs. They're just scattered among people who haven't learned to work together yet. In the front row sat Marcus Chen, the mayor of Riverside Falls, Ohio, a former manufacturing town that had lost its primary employer 3 years earlier. Beside him was Dr. Patricia Valdez from Del Rio, Texas, where drought and economic decline had created a crisis that felt insurmountable. Behind them were representatives from mountain towns in West Virginia, farming communities in Nebraska, and Rust Belt cities in Michigan, all united by the shared experience of watching their homes slowly die and the desperate hope that death might not be inevitable. But the most remarkable attendee was seated near the back of the room, taking careful notes, despite having heard this presentation dozens of times before. Serenity Fuller had completed her nursing degree and was now the Millfield Model Institute's Director of Family Services, helping to design programs that addressed the complex web of challenges facing struggling families. The transformation from desperate mother to respected professional still amazed everyone who knew her story, but no one more than Serenity herself. "Mr. Smith," called out Maria Rodriguez, a community organizer from Phoenix, "how do you identify which people in a community have the capacity to become leaders in this kind of transformation?" Liam smiled, remembering asking similar questions when Julia Murray had first approached him. "You don't identify them," he said. "You create the conditions where they can identify themselves. People rise to meet genuine need when they're given permission to care about each other. The evidence of that principle was scattered throughout Millfield and beyond. Dr. Winters had leveraged her part-time clinic into a regional health network that served 4 counties. Frank Kelly had moved his business headquarters to Millfield and was now developing affordable housing projects in 6 states using the Community Land Trust model. Even Old Pete had found his calling, becoming the Institute's unofficial historian and documenting the transformation process with the meticulous attention to detail that had once been focused solely on reading newspapers. But perhaps the most significant ripple effect had been completely unintended. Emma, now 11 years old and spending every other weekend in Millfield, had started a pen pal program connecting students from the Institute's partner communities. What had begun as a school project had evolved into a network of young people, sharing resources, ideas, and encouragement across geographical and cultural boundaries. "Sometimes the kids understand this better than we do," Emma had explained to a group of visiting educators. They don't see reasons why things can't work. They just see problems that need solving and friends who can help solve them. The Pen program had led to student exchanges, collaborative science projects, and even joint fundraising efforts where students from prosperous communities helped their counterparts in struggling areas while learning valuable lessons about privilege, responsibility, and effective altruism. During the lunch break, Liam found himself in conversation with Dr. James Patterson, a researcher from the University of Colorado who had been studying the Millfield phenomenon for his upcoming book on community resilience. What we've documented here challenges fundamental assumptions about rural development and social services, Dr. Patterson was saying, gesturing toward charts and graphs that quantified the town's transformation. You've achieved better outcomes, with lower per capita investment than any government program or private foundation initiative we've studied. Liam nodded, though he'd learned to be cautious about academic enthusiasm. The numbers are encouraging, he agreed, but they don't tell the whole story. You can't measure the feeling of hope returning to a place or the sense of dignity that comes from solving your own problems. That afternoon, the group participated in Millfield's weekly community meeting held every Wednesday at Mabel's Diner, which had expanded twice to accommodate the growing attendance. The agenda included updates on the Community Land Trust, planning for the annual Kindness Festival, and discussion of a proposal to establish a community-owned renewable energy project. But the most powerful moment came when Serenity stood up to address the visitors directly. "1.5 years ago, she began, her voice steady but thick with emotion, I walked into this diner with my baby daughter. No money, no plan, and no hope. I was ready to accept that my life was just a series of emergencies that I couldn't handle." The room was completely silent, understanding that they were witnessing something significant. Liam Smith gave me $20 that night, but more importantly, he gave me something I had forgotten existed, evidence that people could be good to each other without expecting anything in return. That gift of trust changed everything about how I saw myself and what I thought was possible. She paused, looking around the room at faces that had become family over the months of working together. But here's what I've learned since then. What happened to me wasn't special because it was unusual. It was special because it was exactly what should happen in a healthy community. People should be able to count on each other. Struggling shouldn't mean suffering alone. And everyone should have the chance to both receive help when they need it and give help when they can. The applause that followed was respectful rather than enthusiastic, the kind of response that indicated people were processing profound ideas rather than simply appreciating good speaking. After the visitors had departed and the community members had headed home, Liam and Serenity found themselves alone in the diner, helping Mabel stack chairs and wipe down tables in the comfortable routine that had developed over months of similar evenings. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" Serenity asked, hanging her apron on the hook behind the counter. Liam considered the question seriously. "I think about what would have happened if I had stopped, but decided I couldn't afford to help. I think I would have regretted that decision for the rest of my life. And I think I would have found a way to survive," Serenity replied. "But I wouldn't have learned that I could thrive. There's a difference between getting by and discovering what you're capable of when people believe in you." Mabel, who had been listening quietly while counting the day's receipts, looked up from her work. "You know what I think? I think this whole thing proves that miracles aren't mysterious. They're just what happens when ordinary people decide to be extraordinary for each other." As Liam drove home that evening, past streets that were alive with lights and activity, past the community garden where families were harvesting late-season vegetables, past the childcare center where children were playing in the secure knowledge that their parents were working toward better futures, he reflected on how far they had all traveled from that moment when desperation had met generosity in a diner parking lot. The ripple effects were still spreading, still creating new possibilities, in communities they had never heard of, still proving that kindness was indeed the most renewable resource on earth. And at the center of it all was the simple truth that had started everything. When people choose to see each other's fundamental worth, magical things become not just possible, but inevitable. 2 years after that life-changing conversation with Eleanor Hartwell, Liam Smith stood at the podium of the Colorado State Capitol, addressing a joint session of the legislature about the Community Resilience Bill that would allocate $50 million to replicate the Millfield model throughout the state. But as he looked out at the assembled lawmakers, his mind wasn't on policy implementation or budget allocations. He was thinking about a photograph that sat on his desk back home, a picture of a young woman in a nurse's uniform holding a baby, taken in a diner parking lot that had somehow become the epicenter of a movement that was changing the world. "Honorable members of the legislature," Liam began, his voice carrying the confident clarity that came from absolute certainty in his message. "I'm here today not as an expert in community development or social policy, but as someone who learned firsthand that the most powerful economic development tool in existence costs exactly $20 and requires nothing more than a willingness to see strangers as neighbors." The chamber was unusually quiet, the kind of attentive silence that indicated people were genuinely listening rather than simply waiting for their turn to speak. Behind him on a large screen was a before and after photograph of Millfield's main street, empty storefronts transformed into thriving businesses, vacant lots converted into community gardens, despair replaced by undeniable vitality. 2.5 years ago, I gave my last $20 to a struggling mother because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I had no idea that simple act would eventually lead to this moment, to policies that will affect hundreds of communities across our state. But what I've learned since then is that miracles aren't rare. We just don't recognize them because we've been taught to expect them to look different than they actually do. In the gallery above, Emma sat with Rebecca, both of them beaming with pride that was almost too much to contain. At 13, Emma had become something of a celebrity herself, her student exchange program now operating in 12 states and featured in educational conferences nationwide. But she was still, fundamentally, a girl who was proud of her father for choosing kindness when it mattered most. "The Millfield model isn't complicated," Liam continued, clicking to the next slide, which showed a simple flowchart. "Step 1. Identify people who are struggling but haven't given up hope. Step 2. Provide immediate assistance without conditions or judgment. Step 3. Create opportunities for those people to help others facing similar challenges. Step 4. Step back and watch communities heal themselves." Governor Patricia Martinez, who had championed the legislation, nodded approvingly from the front row. She had visited Millfield 6 months earlier and left convinced that what she had witnessed represented the future of effective governance, not programs imposed from above, but resources provided to enable communities to solve their own problems. "But I want to be clear about something," Liam said, his tone becoming more personal. "This isn't about money, though money helps. This isn't about programs, though programs can provide structure. This is about remembering that we are responsible for each other, and that responsibility is not a burden, it's the source of our greatest strength." After the presentation, the bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, the first time in years that the legislature had achieved such consensus on any significant issue. But for Liam, the real victory had come weeks earlier, in a conversation that few people would ever know about. Serenity had been working late at the Institute, reviewing applications from communities that wanted to join the pilot program, when she had received a phone call that changed everything yet again. The caller was Harold Westbrook, the developer, who had tried to shut down their work through the fraud investigation. "Ms. Fuller," he had said, his voice carrying a humility that must have cost him considerable effort, "I owe you and your community an apology. I also owe you an explanation and possibly an opportunity for a very different kind of partnership." What followed was a confession that was both surprising and revealing. Westbrook had grown up in a town very similar to Millfield, a place that had died slowly when the primary industry collapsed. His family had lost everything, and he had spent his adult life accumulating wealth and power as armor against ever feeling that helpless again. When he saw Millfield's revival, it had triggered something deeper than business concerns. It had forced him to confront the possibility that his hometown could have been saved if people had worked together instead of abandoning each other. "I want to fund expansion of your model into communities that have been written off completely," Westbrook had explained. "Not as an investor looking for returns, but as someone who wants to prove that what happened to my family and my hometown doesn't have to be inevitable." The partnership that emerged from that conversation had added another $50 million to the movement's resources, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that even the people who seemed most opposed to their work might actually be potential allies carrying their own wounds and dreams. Now, 6 months later, the Millfield model was being implemented in 47 communities across 8 states. Each adaptation was slightly different, reflecting local cultures and needs, but all shared the core principle that had started everything: the belief that everyone deserved a chance to hope again, and that communities could heal themselves when given the right support and encouragement. The success stories were becoming too numerous to track individually. A former coal mining town in West Virginia had become a center for renewable energy training. A struggling neighborhood in Detroit had transformed vacant lots into urban farms that supplied fresh produce to the entire region. A fishing village in Maine had developed a sustainable tourism model that celebrated their maritime heritage while providing year-round employment. But for Liam, the most meaningful success story was still unfolding every day in his own life. Emma now spent entire summers in Millfield, working as a junior counselor in the youth programs and developing leadership skills that would serve her well regardless of what career she eventually chose. His relationship with Rebecca had evolved, from polite cooperation to genuine friendship, built on their shared pride in the remarkable young woman their daughter was becoming. Mabel Henderson, now 76 and officially retired, still came to the diner every morning to have coffee and hold court with visitors who wanted to hear first-hand accounts of Millfield's transformation. She had become something of a folk hero, the grandmother figure who had provided the stable foundation that allowed everything else to grow. "You know what I've learned," Mabel had said recently, watching Emma teach a group of younger students how to make her famous apple pie. "People always talk about paying it forward, but that's not quite right. You don't pay kindness forward, you plant it. And then you tend the garden that grows from it." On the evening after his presentation to the legislature, Liam found himself back where it all started, sitting in a booth at Mabel's diner with a cup of coffee and the latest batch of applications from communities that wanted to join the program. The diner was busy, filled with a mixture of locals and visitors who had come to see the place where $20 had somehow multiplied into a movement that was changing the world. Serenity appeared at his table, sliding into the seat across from him with the easy familiarity of someone who had become family through shared purpose rather than shared blood. "Eleanor called," she said, pulling out a folder. "She wants to establish a permanent endowment that will ensure this work continues for generations. $200 million. managed by a board that includes community representatives from every state where the model is operating. Liam looked at the preliminary documents, shaking his head in wonder at numbers that still seemed impossible to comprehend. Do you ever think about what our lives would have been like if that night had gone differently? Serenity smiled, glancing around the bustling diner. I think about it all the time, but then I look at Grace. She nodded toward her daughter, now 4 years old, and helping Emma set up art supplies for the evening children's program. And I realize that this is the life we were always supposed to have. We just had to find our way to it. As the evening progressed and the diner gradually emptied, Liam reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. The $20 he had given away that October night had indeed multiplied, beyond anything he could have imagined, but not in the way he might have expected. It hadn't just grown into money or programs or recognition. It had grown into proof that the world could be different than it often appeared to be. The last customer of the evening was a young father with a tired-looking toddler, counting change to pay for a cup of coffee and a piece of pie to share. Without hesitation, Liam approached their table. "Coffee and pie are on the house tonight," he said gently. "Sometimes we all need a little kindness to keep going." The man's eyes filled with gratitude that looked remarkably familiar. "Thank you," he said simply. "I don't know how to repay this." "You don't repay it," Liam replied, thinking of all the people who had said those same words to him over the past 3 years. "You just remember that someone believed you were worth helping, and someday, when you can, you help someone else remember the same thing." As Liam walked home through streets that hummed with life and possibility, he understood that this wasn't an ending at all. It was simply the latest beginning in a story that would continue long after he was gone. Because that's what miracles really were. Not single moments of impossible magic, but chains of ordinary people choosing to be extraordinary for each other, creating ripples that would spread across the world for generations to come. The $20 bill was long gone, spent on bus fare and baby formula for a desperate mother on a cold October night. But the kindness it represented had become infinite, renewable, and absolutely unstoppable. And in a small town in Colorado, where hope had learned to multiply itself, that was more than enough to change everything. 5 years later, Dr. Grace Fuller adjusted her stethoscope and smiled at the 6-year-old patient whose scraped knee she had just bandaged. As the head of pediatric care at Denver Children's Hospital, she had treated thousands of young patients, but she never forgot that her own life had been saved by a stranger's kindness in a diner parking lot when she was just a baby. "Dr. Fuller," her assistant called from the doorway, "there's someone here to see you. Says it's about the Grace Foundation Scholarship Program." Grace nodded, finishing her notes before walking to the consultation room where a teenage girl sat nervously with her mother. The girl's name was Isabella, and she was 17, brilliant, and determined to become a doctor despite growing up in circumstances that made medical school seem impossible. "I heard about the scholarship from my guidance counselor," Isabella explained, her voice steady despite obvious nerves. "She said you help students who want to help others, especially if they've overcome difficult situations." Grace smiled, thinking of another young mother who had once needed help, and the man who had given his last $20 without a second thought. "Tell me about your dream," she said gently. Across the country, in a small town in Ohio that had once faced the same challenges as Millfield, Emma Smith Martinez finished her presentation to the town council about implementing their own community resilience program. At 18, she was a freshman at Stanford, studying social entrepreneurship, but she spent her summers traveling to communities that wanted to replicate her father's model. "The most important thing to remember," Emma told the assembled council members, "is that transformation doesn't require perfect conditions or unlimited resources. It just requires people who are willing to believe in each other. After the meeting, Emma called her father from her hotel room. "Dad, I think Riverside Falls is going to be our most successful implementation yet. They already have everything they need. They just needed someone to help them see it." Liam's voice came through the phone, warm with pride. "That's what you do best, sweetheart. You help people recognize their own power." Meanwhile, in Millfield, Mabel's Diner had become an official historical landmark with a bronze plaque by the door that read, "In this place, October 15th, 2023, a $20 act of kindness began a movement that changed the world. Dedicated to everyone who believes that strangers are just neighbors we haven't met yet." Mabel Henderson, now 81 and still sharp as ever, led tours twice a week for visitors who came from around the globe to see where it all started. Her favorite part was always the end, when she'd point to the booth where Liam and Serenity had first met. "People ask me what made that night special," Mabel would say to each group, "but there wasn't anything special about it except that two people chose to see each other as human beings worth helping. That choice is available to every single one of us, every single day." The Millfield model had now been implemented in over 200 communities across 15 countries. Each adaptation was unique, but all shared the core principle that Eleanor Hartwell had learned from a Kansas farmer decades earlier. Kindness, when freely given, multiplies in ways that defy mathematics and transform the world. In the Institute's annual report, the numbers were staggering. Over 50,000 families lifted out of poverty. 12,000 small businesses started with community support, 200 communities revitalized, and countless acts of kindness that could never be quantified, but whose impact rippled through generations. But perhaps the most significant statistic wasn't in any report. It was the fact that in every community where the model had been implemented, crime rates had dropped, graduation rates had increased, and something harder to measure but impossible to miss had returned. Hope Eleanor Hartwell, now 93, and still actively involved in the Foundation's work, often reflected on the chain of events that had started with her own roadside rescue 50 years earlier. The farmer who had helped her had never known what his kindness would eventually create, just as Liam had never imagined that $20 would grow into a movement that would outlive them all. And in nursing homes and hospitals, in schools and community centers, in places where people gathered to help each other through difficult times, the story was still being told and retold, not as a fairy tale or an impossible dream, but as proof that ordinary people possessed extraordinary power when they chose to use it for each other. The $20 bill was gone, but the miracle it had planted would never stop growing. Because some investments don't just pay dividends, they pay it forward forever. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.